Hey, this is Jody with WeldingTipsAndTricks.com with another weekly video. So let's get right to it. What we're welding on today is these practice pieces that I put 2 TIG passes on already. So we're going to stack a bunch of stick beads on top of those. Now the way those went in is kind of like this. Just a little quick review. Single pass with lay wire technique, and then a second pass on top of that with a slight weave. Again, lay wire technique. And those were some high strength steel parts that I was practicing on. I had one piece of scrap here to kind of warm up on before I shot that video. So I figured, why not take this piece and stack a whole bunch more beads on it and talk about some stick welding techniques. So what I hope to touch on today is a couple of tie-in techniques and hand positioning and how to maintain the correct rod angle, or not necessarily correct, but something that is at least favorable. And we'll just go from there. So the first bead, when I'm stacking this, like stacking multiple passes like this, I'm trying to pretty much center up on the toe of the weld. That's kind of like my guideline. Just trying to bear down, follow that line that's on the edge of the weld. That's what the toe of the weld is the edge of the weld. And I'm using 7018 Lincoln Excalibur rods today, and they do a really good job. Now, when I put that second pass on, I'm trying to overlap that first pass by almost exactly halfway, maybe even a little bit more. But I'm also, as soon as I get that thing overlapping, I kind of get an idea of where the top of that bead is, and I just try to line up with wherever it is and keep it the same all the way around. Because sometimes there's smoke, there's shadows, there's this and that. You lose your way for a minute. So if you're watching the top of the bead with the reference point and the bottom of the bead where it's overlapping, you get a better shot at keeping straight, not getting all cattywampus, zigzag, heading off toward Aunt Nancy's house and all that good stuff. So that's 2 beads over top of the one, and now we're going to fire up and do a layer of 3 beads. I always try to light up, especially with 7018, a little bit ahead of where I'm going to weld, and then kind of long arc it and then go back and then weld over top of those arc strikes that I made while I was kind of letting the rod warm up. You're always going to get a little porosity or something when you first light up, and it's a good idea to be able to weld over top of all that once everything's heated up and burn it all out. Rods heat up, they burn a lot better than they do that first quarter inch or so when the rod's cold. Now here's a good example of, I'm watching the bottom of the bead overlapping halfway, but I'm also watching the top of the bead and kind of keeping it tracking even from the edge of the weld that I've done previously. And it gives me 2 things to watch. And I'll move the electrode just kind of slightly like this, and it really helps play the light. Not really doing a weave here or a whole lot of motion, but just a little bit of motion helps slow things down. It helps play the light where I can see where I'm going better. Now again, I'm using a way different rod angle for this last bead here because of not wanting to get undercut. So instead of the previous angle where I had it kind of angling down at a 45 kind of, I'm pretty much shooting straight in there. But the hand positioning and the way that I roll the wrist around kind of stays the same. See, the rod angle is just kind of poking straight in there just a little bit, and that's going to help. Undercut is where the arc kind of chewed out metal that it didn't fill back in with molten metal. So you can get it by slipping, you can get it by bad rod angle, you can get it by being way too hot. But keeping that rod angle like this on that last bead helps me to avoid it. I'm not entirely too hot here. Like I said, I'm 140 amps. That's not at all out of range on a 1/8 7018, and sometimes these Excaliburs maybe seem to me anyway, can handle just a little bit more amps than the average run-of-the-mill 7018 rod. Take a look at the old pinky to thumb collapse thing that I'm using here. I just prop like this. To me, it's the most relaxing way to prop for most things, especially round parts. Chuck the rod up in there at a little downward angle, and I've sped it up here where you can kind of watch how the hands move as I go around, and how rolling the wrist around kind of helps keep that rod angle like it should be. Not much to it. Works especially good on small diameter stuff, especially on 6G tests. This is what I like to do when I'm taking a 6G test, which has been a long time since I had to go take one. But I like to prop like this because it just helps me relax and helps me maintain a steady arc. Lets me move a little bit with a little bit more precision than it would be if I just use one hand. And you know, often I might do this with one hand if I already had the job and I was just trying to upgrade my certs. But if I'm driving miles and miles to go take a job, I'm pretty much going to use both hands. And this is the way that I would do it. Even on a larger diameter pipe like a 6-inch like this, still lets me move with a little bit more precision and roll the wrist around and keeps that rod angle like it should be. And it just works for me. Also, even on this, there's an overhead joint that I did several months ago, actually a year or two ago. I'll show you that. It kind of helps keep your elbows and where your arms are creased and your clothing is creased out of the line of fire, where if slag drops, it might just bounce off your gloves rather than get hung up in your crook of your elbow. So again, it works for a lot of different things, and I use it all the time. Maybe not for everybody, but I'm just showing you one way here, not the way. That's for sure. There's always more than one way to do things. So again, just showing you how the wrist rolls around, how the pinky and thumb kind of collapse as the rod gets shorter. It helps you make it a good distance before before you have to stop and restart. Well, let me give you one more better view of how that last bead, the difference in rod angle for that last bead to avoid undercut. The last bead on a multi-pass weld being the top one that ties into the base metal. And so same wrist motion, same hand position, just chucked it up in the electrode holder a little bit differently and used a little bit different angle. But everything else works the same as it does with the other rod angle. Alright, well, I'm not going to bother shining that one up or cleaning it up too much because I got to get back to doing something that pays the bills. But hey, if you like what you saw today, don't forget to hit the like button, the thumbs up button, subscribe. We do one of these videos every week. But also, if you like this video, I think you'll really like the forum over at forum.weldingtipsandtricks.com. There's an awful lot of really helpful guys over there with a whole lot of know-how. So we'll see you next week.